Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Songwriters on Process podcast. My name is Benno Papari, and since 2010, I've run the Songwriters on Process website, where you can find more than 200 conversations with songwriters about the creative process. I'm not here to talk about tour stories, band drama, how a band got its name, or favorite foods. My goal is to treat songwriters as writers, plain and simple. This is an intelligent conversation about the writing process between two writers. And today's interview is a good one, people. It's with Philip Selway of Radiohead. Selway is the drummer of Radiohead, as I'm sure there are Radiohead fans out there. You know that well. But if you didn't, he's the drummer. And he has a new solo album out on Bella Union Records called Strange Dance. It comes out February 24th. It is fantastic. And we went deep into a songwriting process, as I'm supposed to do on this podcast. But if you are here, let me just forewarn you, if you are here to listen to anything having to do with the band, with Radiohead, I am proud to say that in the entire, 50 minutes of this interview, we did not once mention the band, anyone in the band, nothing about what the band is doing, how the band influences him. I am laser focused on Selway as a songwriter. So if you're here to listen to Radiohead news, you're not going to find it here. We just talked about Selway's creative process. And that's a good one. He told me the best writing happens when I'm looking the other way. My songs come along when they choose. And I hear that often, the whole grabbing the songs out of the ether that a lot of them tell me. Couple of interesting things. He said that his drum stool, he likes to write on his drum stool. And this is the one reference to Radiohead. He said, my drum stool grounds me in my wider life. So, rather than a writing chair or something like that, he writes on his drum stool. I thought that was interesting. Two things I found fascinating. One, he gets profoundly affected by watching dance, not by dancing, but by watching dance. He finds that to be incredibly inspiring to him creatively. And when we talked about the actual writing of the lyrics, he said he writes down a mind map. He takes a blank piece of paper and he has a blue pen, a black pen, and a pencil. He feels much more connected to the words when he writes with a pen or a pencil. And if he'll write with one, and if he's not feeling it, he switches to another one. And he said switching between the utensils moves the process along. He doesn't erase, though. He'll cross out with the pencil. I thought that was interesting, too. No one's ever mentioned watching dancing, and I've had songwriters tell me that they write with pens and pencils and things like that. But, again, as a lot of them tell me, the mindless activities are a great source of inspiration. So, hey, listen, I'm a big Radiohead fan, so this was a lot of fun to talk to him and just fascinating. Super nice guy. He got his start way, way back when as a copy editor. So he is a wordsmith. He's a man of words. It's not in the podcast, but we did talk about if he's pro Oxford comma, serial comma. And I think he said he's pro serial comma, pro Oxford comma, but literature is also a big influence on his life, and we talked about that. So again, great conversation here. As you can imagine, anyone in that band is filled with creative ideas. So this was a special one. I hope you enjoy it. And here is my interview with Philip Selway of Radiohead. So thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me. The first thing I always start with is I was listening to this interview with Bruce Springsteen about a month ago. And I think with the radio broadcaster Howard Stern, and he asks Bruce Springsteen if he writes every day, and Springsteen said no, because I don't have something. Sometimes I have nothing to say. And I thought, wow, that was interesting that someone who writes as much as he does doesn't write every day. So I'm curious, how important is it as an artist for you to create in some fashion every day, or is it more of just a question of when the mood strikes? I guess as an artist, in any fashion, is it important to create every day?
I think there has to be some kind of creative time there. And that can just be engaging with something that somebody else has produced. But in terms of actually writing, no, I don't write every day, and it can actually, I have to wait for the muse to take me, so to speak, and that sometimes that can actually be worryingly long in between instances of that happening, really. But I find actually writing happens when I'm looking the other way. If you like, if I sit down and think, right, I've got to write something now, generally it doesn't happen too well. It can. I mean, when I've done soundtracks, you have to kind of write to order to a certain extent on there. So that is a very different discipline. But for actually kind of my songs, they come along when they choose. And you just have to make sure that you're receptive to them when they do appear as well. I mean, that is, the voice memos on my phone are just full of ideas, because I've learned the hard way that in the past there have been ideas that have come along and I think, oh, that's really strong. We ought to remember that, won't I? And no. And so kind of I keep a constant note of even just little fragments of melodies coming up.
I was going to ask you this later on, but since you brought it up, songwriters tell me all the time about the voice memos that they have. And there's very little do I hear people talk about any sense of organization with the voice memos. There's hundreds of them on their phone. They're not organized. And I just get great anxiety because I think, what is it like to scroll through all of them? And where is that one from 3 weeks ago? So is there any sense of organization to those voice memos on your phone?
Every so often I will think, oh, do you know what, I should name these memos. And so you'll go from kind of like every 2 or 3 months you get a couple of voice memos with a name on, and then in between it's just like voice memo number 456, and it carries on like that. In a way that's kind of nice, because you can just dive back in and come across stuff you have absolutely no recollection of having put down in the first place. And actually, that's quite an effective angle to come at it from, because you're coming with completely fresh ears. And it could be that at the time you just thought, well, I don't know if that's so great, but actually you can see the nugget of a good idea in there, and then you can develop that. I mean, my voice memos are just this big amorphous blob, to be honest with you. I backed them up as well. They're in the cloud, but yeah, they're kind of. It is really interesting just going back through them from time to time, and particularly at those points when you're thinking, do you know what, I haven't really come up with anything for a while, and there you can go in and actually you have all these starting points in there, they're so unself-conscious as well. It is literally you have an idea, you put it down, you leave it, and move on. So there's always a real freshness to them. Sometimes there's a little bit of cringeworthiness to them as well. But on the whole, I think you can, if something's saying to me at the time, that's an idea that's worth keeping, then on the whole, I'd say, there is something to work with there.
You mentioned distance, and for me, at least as a writer, I find the distance is probably the most important part of my revision process. That the more distance I give something, the more fresh eyes, the fresher the eyes are, and I'm able to look at it. Often, if there's something I don't like, and I give it a few days, there are things that I find in there that are, that I maybe didn't see earlier. So I deliberately use that as a part of my process. So do you use distance, after things have been created, do you deliberately use distance as a part of that revision process, whether it's music or lyrics?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, actually kind of with the album that I've just made, Strange Dance, that took, over a period of about a year and a half, almost 2 years to write and record. And within that, there were always these periods where I would take time away from it so that I could come back with fresh ears. Other points, other stuff in life took over, so I had to step away from it. But each time that I stepped away and came back to it, I felt that the process benefited from it. And I find that actually kind of once I've completed a song, when I've been in the throes of writing it, it makes sense to me. Then when I've completed it, to that point where I've completed, I'm just thinking, does that make sense? And then actually having some time away from it after that, and that's particularly when you start talking about the songs as well to other people, it's just like, oh yeah, I get it now. And you kind of really, you get an insight into all the different stages of, say, life, writing the lyric, all the rewrites in there, but they all leave their imprint on there, and they all kind of grow into the life of the song. And I find that side of it fascinating. Also, I think it just gives an insight into yourself, really. I think, and things bubble up which can surprise you, I guess. So it's kind of leaving the room for that to happen.
I've also noticed recently that sleep is a very restorative process, and here's what I mean. So if I write something, let's say I finish something at 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the morning, and I look at it 12 hours later, I don't have the same. I'm not as aggressive in my revision and my cutting of words as if, let's say, I finished at 9 o'clock at night and revised at 9 o'clock the next morning. There's something about sleep, whether it's a reset, where, one night's sleep, I come at it the next day and I'm much more willing to get rid of things that I wasn't willing to get rid of. I don't know why that is, but I don't know what it is about sleep, that does that. But I find that if I do need to get rid of something I'm writing, I just finished something is too long. If I give it one night, I get up that next morning and I didn't need that. And I don't know what it is about sleep that does that, but do you find that can be a helpful part to the process? Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, I mean, my words. I mean, sleep is so essential to me, really. And I kind of unravel very quickly. And I think that's interesting what you're saying. Kind of without that kind of buffer zone of the sleep, that restoration of the sleep, you do get stuck in a loop on something. You become over attached to things, because that's never a healthy thing to part of the creative process, really. I think you have to keep an open mind and let go, be prepared to let go quite a lot, actually. And so I find that kind of with me, with sleep, it's that kind of that grounding process of it, and those things that you've been building yourself up into a little bit of a tiz about whilst you've been writing it, they're just not that important when you wake up the next morning. And so you can come to it with a much fresher take. So yeah, I completely agree with you. When I was finishing the very last track on Strange Dance, which is the title track, Strange Dance, I mean, that took an age to write. And I was booked in to go and do the vocal session. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll pull an all-nighter on this one. I will be there. And I got to that point like about 4 o'clock in the morning where I thought, oh, nearly there. And it was just that lack of sleep. Suddenly I had that panic of thinking, oh my God, this is not going to happen. I'm going to look such a fool going into this session. All this hard work that's gone into making this record, everything that everybody's put into it, it's just going to be all for nothing because stupid Philip can't get it to write the second verse on this song. And that's what sleep does, or lack of sleep does. It distorts everything. That can be an interesting place creatively in some ways. And actually, in fairness to me, in that instance, I did at its very 11th hour, I did manage to write the second verse, but it was like 10 minutes before I left to go and record the vocal. And actually, it turned out to be kind of one of my favorite lyrics on the album. But yeah, I couldn't do that every day as a working practice. So yes, sleep is really vital to how I function and how I can be productive and creative.
Let's talk about that process. I mean, I think it's important. I know what works for me and what doesn't work for me. So I have a chair. I'd separate writing from revisions. So I have a chair that I write in and I revise in a separate chair because I want distance. I know that about myself. I know that it works. There's times of day when I'm more, I'm a morning person. I'm not a night person. There are things I have to have with me. I think the ritual is important. I read all these interviews with writers in the Paris Review. And I think that's an important thing to know what works and what doesn't. So what is that ritual? Do you have a ritual, whether it's a favorite room, time of day, things you have to have with you when you tend to be the most effective?
Well, like you, I'm a morning person. So I find that actually that stretch up to probably around lunchtime, early afternoon, that is quite a fertile time for me. And kind of, getting on with your admin and all of that side and all the grown-up stuff of life is very important. But that can wait till I've got less brain capacity, I think, later on in the day. So if I feel, there's a deadline coming up with a piece, I will use that time and for focusing on my writing. And then I find once actually I've started that process, I can step away from it and it will be kind of whirring away at the back of my head. And so I can then come back to it throughout the day. But I do hit that point kind of mid-evening where basically my brain is jelly and I won't get anything else out of it until I'm just about to go to bed. And then it just goes, and it's like, oh, really? Now? And I might have a little brief window then to get stuff down again. So, yeah, there are particular places that I will write. I mean, I find lyric writing, I find I need to be near kind of a guitar or a piano. Kind of, you see me here at the moment by a piano. Would be a good place to work. And actually, in terms of chairs, I'm on a drum stool at the moment. That kind of grounds me in my wider life. And so things like that, all of those things, they kind of feed into it. I remember there's a fantastic book that the dancer and choreographer Twyla Tharp wrote about the creative process. And actually, she's been very she kind of demystifies the whole process, and a lot of what she talks about in there is having that ritual. If it's something like, when you come in, lighting a candle, because actually, you're saying to your brain, right, I am going to start this creative process. I'm going into a different space and a different headspace. And I think those things are quite, I think they're really important, because you've got to find some discipline in the process, and actually you've got to find the stamina to sit with it as well, particularly when the ideas that you're coming up with in those moments don't feel like the most inspiring. It's easy once you've got a good idea, because then you're just keeping up with a runaway horse then. But in the and that's not the general pattern for me. And so it is just that whole thing of sitting there with it and trying not to get too anxious about it either, which is all very well saying that, but kind of when you've got a deadline looming over you, then that can be quite anxiety inducing. But yeah, I guess, anxiety has its place in there. It can be a fuel in there, but I find actually having as kind of like as a calmer environment as I can have, I find that very, very useful. So yes, it's making sure you kind of sit down, you say, I'm going to work at this for 4 hours now, little break here, kind of mix it up. For me, it might just be playing another song altogether. But it is just keeping those cogs moving and trying to constantly open out the possibilities of an idea as well. Some days it works and they're fantastic. Other days, you beat yourself up about it. That's just
right.
it.
You mentioned you've said anxiety a few times. We've all been in that situation, where we're up against deadlines, and somehow we're able to create when we know we're up against those deadlines. So, I find that what I've actually done is incorporated false deadlines into my process. So a false deadline for me isn't, I'll write for an hour, start the stopwatch if there's nothing to do after that hour. But let's say I have a phone call at 2, a scheduled phone call. I won't start writing until 1. Now, what I'm writing has nothing to do with that phone call, but it's still a hard stop where I know that I have to stop and finish writing. And I know that about myself because we live in Washington, D.C., and I go to New York for business all the time, which is like a 3-hour train ride. And I will get more done in those 3 hours than if I sat here for 3 hours because I know I have to stop because the train pulls in. I've got to put my laptop away. So I deliberately use false deadlines as a part of my process as a way to kind of just get my butt in gear. So I'm curious if that's ever happened to you, because you mentioned, looming deadlines and anxiety when things aren't coming. And I find that if things aren't coming to me, if I'm in a rut, I'll use a deadline to just kind of that false deadline to really get me going.
I think, you're talking about that whole thing of traveling. Being in transit, it has its kind of natural conclusion, and that whole thing of the movement of it as well. That can be a very creative space to be in, and deadlines they're kind of vital to the whole process, aren't they? Yes, you do have to impose deadlines on yourself. And I do that, kind of with making Strange Dance, I always knew what was coming up. And when I was doing my kind of initial demos and session templates, I'd committed to sharing those with my collaborators and with Marta, the producer, on a particular date. And that was kind of, that was like about a week or so up ahead of where I needed to be. But also knowing that actually I would need that contingency time in there because I knew that I would go a week beyond, really. But yes, so, and then you get those very kind of natural deadlines in the studio. You booked in for a week, and you know that you have those particular musicians there for a week, so you have to make those decisions. I guess it's for decisions, isn't it?
Yeah,
that keeps everything moving forward, and then that's where you need the time for reflection as well. Because they're not always going to be the right decisions, but you've made a decision, so you have something there to respond to, and that you can come back to and change if need be. And if it's if it's gone beyond the deadline for actually finishing the entire project, then you just say, well, there you go, lesson to be learned there. I'll work that into my work practice next time. But yeah, deadlines and decisions kind of propel the whole process forward. And yeah, I do try and build them in.
Yeah. What about movement? I mean, I every writer, every songwriter I've interviewed, and I do this the same way. There's nothing about a good walk when I find, or I go running all the time. I'll run, there's nothing like a good run or a good walk to get kind of to clear things up. And I find so many ideas come to me. The ideas don't come, when I'm sitting here, they come when I'm doing something else, but actually exercising. So I'm curious if that's a part of your process as well.
It is, yeah. I'm coming back to the whole voice memos thing. You get the idea, but you do get all this ambient noise in there with them. It's like the wind from a walk, or traffic noise, or kind of, I don't know, treadmill in the background or something like that. Yes, I find that there's that sense of movement can order things for you. It can give you greater clarity. I guess, it's just that whole process of your body moving. It changes your body chemistry, I guess, in that moment. And exercise, you're going to be releasing all those endorphins anyway, and all of that, all of those things are kind of fuel to the fire. So, and also you're occupying a big part of your brain, that subconscious part of that part of your brain, which I can't think the name of at the moment, but which that has all those automatic functions of your body. You're occupying that, so it's kind of, that doesn't have an opportunity to get anxious. It's being occupied, and it's you can say to it, you go and do that. I'll just get on with this over here, thank you. And so you kind of freeing up that kind of really creative, effectively creative part of your brain. That's how I feel when I do exercise or go walking.
Well, I can't tell you how many times it's happened to me too, but songwriters tell me they get ideas not just when they're walking or doing something like that, but when they're doing a mindless activity, like you're saying, doing the dishes, running a vacuum cleaner, cleaning, gardening, those. And I think that's what we're talking about, that your subconscious brain, your brain's kind of is occupied with doing that mindless activity, repetitive activity. And then that lets your subconscious kind of bubble up. But I hear that all the time, the ideas people get, not just when they're exercising, but when they're doing some kind of mindless activity.
I think it's a big tell with me for my wife. If I'm doing housework, she'll say, all right, you're trying to avoid writing, aren't you? Is it that obvious?
Right. So with the writing, then the big question is, with the lyrics, are you a pen and paper person or a computer person?
I am a pen and paper person. So I've got my notebook, which it goes through endless drafts on something, and then when I'm really stuck, I'll get a big sheet of paper and place that on the floor and just throw all the ideas down on there, and then try and kind of make like a little mind map through there and see if that helps. But yeah, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't engage the right parts of my brain in using a computer. I guess I'm of that generation. It was I learned to generate those ideas at a time in education when it was pen and paper. It wasn't computer. I guess it might be different for anybody who's come up through that whole, with that technology at their fingertips. I see it with my kids. That's how they express themselves. That's what makes their brain tick in the right way. But for me, I need that tactile sense of seeing. Again, I guess it's that physical process as well, which I guess I feel more connected to what's going down on the paper. There feels like more of me invested in it when I see it there in my handwriting. And you can't doodle on your computer either. And so kind of got lots of doodles going, very bad doodles, but lots of doodles going on around all my words as well.
Well, first of all, I think there's plenty of studies have shown that when it comes to note taking for students, and we have 4 kids, and we talk about this all the time, that people retain information better when they write it down rather than when they're typing it, as far as notes. But a couple follow-ups. One, I find that songwriters are incredibly particular with the color of ink, brand of pen, and maybe paper. But does that matter to you at all? The color of ink or the type of pen? Is there a favorite that you have?
So with my notebook, I've got one of these little pen holders which kind of goes around the book. And in there, I've got a blue pen and a black pen and a pencil. And it kind of, it shouldn't influence what you're doing, but I find that if I kind of keep on switching between them as I'm going along, then it helps the process along, you know? And pencil is brilliant as well. I mean, you know, not going to do any kind of erasing, as I think that's a big mistake, but there's just something, there's somewhere extra to hide in pencil, I think. And so you kind of always, I find I'm always trying to kid myself into that position where it's just like, you know, you can do this anonymously. It's fine. And there's nothing kind of riding on it. You're going to be okay. And kind of, if I can find my way to that spot, then I know I can produce something, you know, passable.
And are you crossing out or are you erasing? I'm assuming you're crossing out because you don't want to, if you need that later, it's still there, right? If you write a lyric that you don't like.
Unless I really dislike it and I'm very tired, I generally don't cross out. I will just keep on kind of writing and redoing it. And yeah, actually, if I start crossing out, then I think that's generally time to go to bed.
You know, I interviewed Daniel Lanois a couple of years ago, and he told me almost exactly what you said. And I think if I recall, he said he does all of his lyric writing on 11 by 22 blank art paper. And just like you said, with the doodling and the thought bubbles, and it's not linear at all. And there's stuff all over the place. And it's not a linear lyric process. And I think that's kind of what you're telling me, is that process is not linear really to you at all, is it?
No. I mean, you're trying to pull all these different elements from kind of like the recesses of your brain, and so you know, I think the page actually has to reflect that process, really. I mean, not that I understand that. Yeah, not that I understand that process. I mean, you know, I'm certainly no neuroscientist, but it's like kind of when you're looking at the work of like an abstract expressionist painter or something. There is something you look at, you just think, yeah, that's how a brain works. Mm-hmm. And kind of trying to do the similar thing with the written word on a piece of paper. And that's a very important part of the process. Generally, I don't want to stay there. I kind of want it to have much more of a narrative to it, and a kind of something, a relatable thread to it. But I think actually just acknowledging how your brain works on the paper when it's just for yourself, and reflecting that, I think that's a really powerful process to go through.
I think no matter what you're doing, you have to recognize, you know, as much as we like to think that it's this thing where you're just grabbing ideas out of the ether, we have to know what works for us and what doesn't. I mean, for me, it's confidence. If I know that in that chair, the revision is going to be over there, or, you know, this is what works for me, that just gives me more confidence to know that I can create, rather than the arbitrary sense of, oh, it might happen, it might not. But I do think we have to have an awareness of that process, you know, for confidence purposes, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, confidence is the key in it. If you're racked with doubt throughout the writing, it's going to speak volumes through what you're writing. And is that confidence actually, this may not be the kind of the ultimate take on this idea, or this idea might not actually go anywhere, really. but the confidence to see it through and see that something that you can park and come back. It's kind of, as we were talking about earlier, it's something that you can have there and that you can come back to and respond to at a later time. But you're not going to get to that point without that confidence.
Yeah,
I think.
And that confidence for me is if I am writing something, if I have an hour to write something, I'd like to create a skeleton draft with that's like a shell of the whole thing. Like if I'm going to do 30% of a document, I'd rather do 30% that has a beginning, middle, and end rather than the first 30% of it, because there's somewhere in my mind I know, oh, at least it is finished. There's at least a shell of it. And that, and again, I'm a prose writer, not a songwriter, but I create a skeleton draft, which is, okay, when I'm done with it, at least I know there's an outline of the total thing rather than just the first third of it. And for me, that just gives me incredible confidence to kind of complete the project if I know that there is a beginning, middle, and end to it.
Yeah. Sorry, you're taking me right back to English classes at school now, and just those endless hours of essay technique and how to write an effective essay. But it's great. I mean, once it's ingrained in you, it's it's a really good process to be able to tap into. I don't know if it works for me songwriting, which I find quite frustrating, because actually I know where I am with essay writing, and there's something about the nature of lyric writing which just feels so open-ended. Yes, I think there is that. It's coming back to this thing again. Also, I don't know what the song is going to be about until I've finished it. Mm-hmm. So it's constantly shifting all the time. Although, no, it's interesting, actually. I was thinking in a few instances where I've written a song for that's been in a soundtrack, I kind of know what purpose it serves in, what kind of dramatic purpose it will serve at that point, where the character's going. And that actually having that framework has been really useful because you've got something there to respond to. I think kind of with the when I'm writing songs for myself, it's a big part of the process is actually finding what I want to write about, and I don't know that until I get to the end of the song. Really,
you're speaking to a quote by the novelist E.L. Doctorow, and I wish I had it in front of me, but he says something like, "Writing is like driving at night with headlights. You can't see the final destination; you can just see what's in front of you." And
that's great.
Isn't that exactly what we're talking about? That you don't know where it's going to end. Yeah, but you can all you can see is what's immediately in front of you, but you're going to get to the end eventually. So a couple more questions. Since you mentioned art, you mentioned abstract art. Ernest Hemingway once said all writers should go to art galleries to be inspired. And I'm curious what other art, if you do use art galleries, because I hear that pretty commonly, but other artistic endeavors, other art forms, I should say, that inspire you as a songwriter.
So there's a couple of things there, really. Actually, in the process of writing Strange Dance, I was working in parallel with the artist Stuart Geddes. So he's in Bristol, based in Bristol in the UK. And we're friends. And so when I was starting to work on the songs that became the album, we were going into lockdown, and we were both aware that we were kind of isolated in our studios, working away, but having nothing really to respond to. So we agreed that at the end of each week, we would get together on Zoom and just talk about the week, talk anything about the week, really, be that kind of, I don't know, football, family, whatever. But a big part of that conversation was also talking about what we've been working on during the week. And so this very kind of natural dynamic where both our works were kind of running in parallel, and they were feeding into each other. And so it felt like a very natural process to then ask Stuart to make the paintings, which became the artwork.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I found that fascinating, seeing how Stuart was responding to what I was writing, picking up the kind of the textures and the tones from what he was doing. And I think it was kind of a two-way street, really, in that respect. So that was a really good litmus test for me, I think, as I was going through the process of writing the record. So there's a kind of, again, he works in that kind of abstract expressionism as well. And so it's kind of, I was looking at it, there's something about it that was kind of, it almost spoke the same language as music. And just looking at it, thinking, yes, if that's how I was going to visualize an emotion, that would be it. And so for me, it gave me a lot of clarity on what I was doing. So I found that really a really inspiring process. The other side for me, I know when things are kind of hitting the right spot musically for me, because I start seeing things in terms of movement. So I think some people, they will talk about their synesthesia and they'll see colours. For me, it translates into music. I don't know if there's a term into movement, so I don't know if there's a term for that. And so kind of for me, dance is very important. And I get a huge amount of there is something I don't understand the process. I don't understand what it unlocks in me, but it certainly, watching dance unlock very profound feelings for me, I think. And profoundly affecting feelings, whether they're actually profound thoughts that could accompany them, that's a whole different matter. But so yes, I mean, and again with the album, it felt like a very natural process then to draw dance into the project. So I've been able to work with a quartet of dancers to do videos. They're dance pieces which accompany some of the songs on here. There's I find kind of really, really fertile place to be creatively is going up to, say, like the Edinburgh Festival in August, and just having, it's just in the air around you all the time. And that cultural diversity, that kind of, that fear of performance, and all of those fear and delight in performance as well, and all those kind of elements. They sharpen your senses, I think, and make your ideas feel far more vivid. And if there's a lot going on around you as well, when you're in those situations, there's less chance to second guess yourself as well. So, ideas will come and you're not immediately thinking, oh, that's awful. That's really bad. No, that's just kind of that idea recycled. There is something there is that sense of actually you're occupying those ideas at that time and they feel unique to you as well. So kind of being in that kind of environment is, it is really important.
It's energizing. It's what Hemingway is saying, isn't it? I mean, he's around, when you go to art galleries and you're around the artists, it's that same thing. It's being around other creatives that's inspiring. I guess it makes sense.
It does. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the great things of touring is that you get to go around, visit galleries all over the place.
Yeah.
You never would otherwise. And that is so inspiring, and I'm at the moment. I'm living in London, and having that kind of that access to all the galleries, all that London has to offer culturally. That's been an eye opener, and it's felt like a very creative place to be. And I really do respond to having that input. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So last question. So let's talk writing. Who you like to read, books, what inspires you, favorite genres, favorite authors. I'll tell you, my PhD is in 20th century dramatic literature, so playwrights. So I was not, didn't read novels. I mean, I'm obviously read plenty of novels and poems, but so, I find nothing more inspiring to me than just reading good writing. So how much of that is a part of your routine, and who do you like to read?
I have to admit, Ben, that I am a bit of a slow reader. Even though it's an English degree, I am a slow reader.
So am I. I am very, very slow. And I'm convinced that, I don't know if everyone is like that, but I've always been a slow reader. Absolutely. So
I had this thing, but when I had a proper job, I was actually a copy editor at a publishing
I saw
house. And you can kiss goodbye to kind of use reading for pleasure, because you just sit there. I mean, not as bad as I was, but for a long time, I would just sit there thinking, oh, really? I think you could have tidied that sentence up a bit more, couldn't you? And go through it with that kind of analytical eye on it. So yes, I'm a slow reader anyway. I think that made me even slower. Writers, yes, but it is a kind of, I think once a book's captured your imagination, that is such an exciting place to be, and you just don't want to leave it. I spoke earlier on about the writer Jenny Fagan. Her writing has that effect on me. She's the book I mentioned, Luck and Booth. You kind of you start at the beginning of the book with the Devil's Daughter and her kind of like journey through Edinburgh and the psychogeography of Edinburgh, and this kind of, as it unfolds out over a century of occupants of this particular house on Luckenbooth Place. And that thing, suddenly you find yourself, you've lost yourself in this world with an author who's just got such a developed voice of their own, a very singular take on the world around them. So I love losing myself in that process. With Jenny Fagan, she's kind of written other incredible books like The Panopticon and Hex. And so kind of, that process of once you're actually into the mindset of a writer, you almost kind of like, you find yourself almost, your life becomes briefly interpreted through their voice, if you like, and that's really interesting. Over the past couple of years, I'll tell you one piece that really hit home with me. But there's a record, an album called Chalk Hill Blue. It's on the music side of it. It's a writer called Hannah Peel, who has she's actually played on my record, but she was working with a writer called he's a poet and a novelist called Will Burns, and I loved the soundscapes that they were kind of producing between them. There was something kind of really visceral in his writing. It felt very rooted in nature, and then the kind of this slightly dissonant world that then Hannah created in the music. And when you feel that coming together, it really accentuates kind of the music of the poetry. I think poetry always has its music in there. And when it works, it really does. And it's really obvious. But to actually hear a piece where the music just so keys into that, and you just get this very intense reading of the works then as well. So yeah, that's probably where I've got to in my slow reading.
Yeah, well, it's funny when I finish an author, my first reaction isn't let me read everything else by that author. I want to get other voices in my head. So I'm not a favorite author person. I feel like if I have a finite amount of time on this planet, I don't want to read everything by one person. I want to read a bunch of voices. That's always my initial reaction. Isn't, oh, let me find out let me read everything by that person. It's, I want to read something else. Are you like that, or are you I've got to devour everything by that author once I read that book that I like?
I think once when I've finished a book, I almost go through kind of like this very minor grieving process with it. You're leaving that world, and I have to step away. I can't jump into another book straight away. It feels like an infidelity. So yeah, I have to step away and wait for something that actually captures my imagination again.
And that's it for the latest episode of Songwriters on Process. Don't forget, you can find all of my interviews with over 200 songwriters on my Songwriters on Process website at songwritersonprocess.com, going all the way back to 2010. You can read them, watch them, or listen to them. So until next time, thanks for listening.